Hey trainers, welcome to the third and final episode in this podcast in which ToCool101 and I are ranking the 150 first gen Pokemon from the Kanto region. And Tyler here is our resident Kanto expert in the community who has been, of course, playing the games since they came out with Game Boy, watched the anime, has kept up with various games through the years, just really a hardcore Kanto Pokemon fan, so it's really exciting for us to be able to do this together. And Tyler, you were just wrapping up a bit of Pokemon Go gameplay before we hopped on here together. What were you working on there?
Oh yeah, Jesse and James flew by in their Meow balloon, so being a Kanto person, I couldn't let them go by unscathed, so had to finish them off. So.
Of course. I love that they have Jesse and James included in the game. And the shadow Pokemon is Scyther, right, that you get for beating?
Scyther from Jesse and Pincer from James.
Have you been able to play with either of those in the Battle League?
I keep getting weak 0 or 1 stars, so they usually just get transferred, unfortunately.
Enough. Yeah, that's usually the way it goes with the shadow Pokemon, right? It seems really hard to get one with decent IVs. So, but we keep trying. Someday. Yeah, the only one that I've really found to be strong and super useful for me so far has been Shadow Torterra, which I really love. But that is not a first-gen Pokemon, so we will skip talking about Torterra for now, and we will hop back into the Kanto Pokemon for Kanto Celebration Week this week. We have ranked the first, how many have we gone through? 99?
I believe we are through 99, and starting with number 100, Voltorb.
Voltorb is one that I did not appreciate as much when I was younger, but I have come to really appreciate especially Electrode in Pokemon Go because of the different moves it can learn and its general offense against some of the key meta players like Azumarill. But Voltorb can potentially turn out to be a Ditto. It's one of those handful of players in Pokemon Go that might be a Ditto when you catch it. But that's not a point necessarily for Voltorb and its design. It's just a fun thing that can happen in Pokemon Go. I don't know. I feel like it's probably lower tier. Its design isn't all that advanced, but it's, I don't know, it's a little more fun to me than something like a Nidoran or a Pidgey.
Mm-hmm. So there is a category even below our E category called Banished. And for me, Voltorb would be the first one that I would consider even putting in the Banished.
Oh, wow.
Not saying we have to put it there, but my first points are, I mean, it's design. It's a Pokeball with eyes. It's not an organic Pokemon. You know, if you're thinking about it, like, how does this come to be? You know, you could see like how a Nidoran or a Nidorino could be born or something from Nidoqueen or something like that, like an animal. But there's nothing organic about a Voltorb. You know, to me, it makes me think it's made in a lab and they created it, but there's nothing about that in the anime. It's just kind of there.
Yeah.
Electrode's a little bit better just because it's a lot bigger. It's, you know, but a Voltorb's the size of a Pokeball. It's, you know, Voltorb's at least, or Electrode's at least bigger and, you know, has at least a mouth. I don't like either of them particularly all that well, just because as a Pokemon, it's like, is it an animal? Like, what is it? It's a genetically experimented Pokeball. For me, I would consider it even for banishment. I don't think they should be Pokemon. I don't understand them at all. But that would be what I would say. But obviously, I could see putting, you know, Voltorb in the E. But for me, it's almost worthy of banishment. So those are kind of my thoughts.
Strong feelings. I've noticed that you don't really like any of the non-organic players here. That's something that sticks with you.
Yeah, I mean, like, where do they come from? It just doesn't make a lot of sense, right? Like, as a kid, you may not care, but now that I'm older, it's like, where did it come from?
Mhm.
So, so those are my thoughts. We obviously don't have to banish it. There's still one or two that I'm going to recommend for banishment later in this
Oh,
list.
really?
But it's very low for me.
To be honest, I had just removed the banishment section because I figured we would at least put all of the first gen in E. So, but we'll figure that out once we get to them. I figure for Voltorb, because I was thinking about D and you were thinking about banishment, that maybe the middle ground is the
that works.
category.
That works.
And then where does Electrode go?
Electrode at least has some uses. It has the same pitfalls as Voltorb. But I'd be okay with moving it up to D. But it's still just a Pokeball with eyes.
Fair enough. Okay, we can put that in D. And then we have some very odd Pokemon coming up. We've got Execute and Executor. Tell me what you think about these unusual psychic types.
Well, one's scrambled eggs, and one is I don't know, a Hawaiian coconut tree. They're fun. I like Executor a lot more than I like Execute. I would probably rank them somewhere in the middle. The psychic grass typing is cool, especially for Executor, however you want to pronounce that. I'm not so much for the Execute, just the eggs.
Yeah.
At least it's not just one egg. At least it's like not like a Diglett Doug trio. There's not like a middle ground where there's like 5 eggs. So I would probably put Execute maybe in the D and Executor in the C. I don't know. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, that's more or less what I was thinking. I do think Executor is kind of fun because they give it the fangs and contrast that with the sort of goofy rounded eyes that they put on it and everything. The design is fun because it kind of has those trunk-like legs that's sort of a cross between a tree and an elephant, and then its hair is the different leaves. So I thought the design was kind of fun. It does have some utility in the meta because it helps you guard against both water types and fighting types at the same time. So that can be pretty helpful because, of course, water and fighting are pretty popular categories in the game. So yeah, I definitely think it's better than those that we have in the D category. I don't think it's necessarily on par with some of those more beloved players like Rapidash or Venusaur or things like that. But so yeah, I'm with you there.
Perfect.
And then we have a set of Pokemon that have perhaps the creepiest backstory of any of the first gen Pokemon. Would you elaborate on the background for Cubone and Marowak?
Yeah, so when you're a kid, you don't really understand the background, which is probably really good. But when you become older, you understand what's going on. And I actually like these Pokemon because they relate to the ghost Pokemon, right? They kind of tie in with the ghost Pokemon of Gen 1. And
Right.
So the backstory really is, as you can see, Cubone is wearing a bone mask, which is actually going to be the skull of his dead mother, or Marowak. As you can see in the pictures below, how Marowak has a much larger skull. Well, when Marowak dies, the Cubone wears her head. So it's kind of weird story for a 10-year-old. So when you're 10, you don't really understand that, and they don't really make that. They don't really say that, but right? So so it's a little weird. It's a little creepy. Generally speaking, I actually like both of them. I like that they're better. Like they actually have a backstory. Other Pokemon like Mankey or Tentacool or Grimer, they're just Pokemon. They don't have a story, right? Everything that's like in the D category. So that alone, I think, puts them at least in the C category. They at least have some type of history or story.
Yeah.
I don't particularly like either one of them more or less than the other one, so I would probably put them in the same category wherever we put them. And those are my basic thoughts. I mean, I like them because they relate to the ghost Pokemon, who, as you saw recently, I'm big fans of. So since there's not a lot of ghost Pokemon in Gen 1, they're kind of resident ghost Pokemon almost because of the whole dead mother thing. So
Right. Well, my initial thoughts were to put Cubone in C and Marowak in maybe B, but I could see them both being in the same category if you felt strongly about that too.
I mean, I don't feel strongly. I mean, Marowak, I think the most of the story and the lore is for Cubone. But Marowak is obviously the better player. Has more utility, is better. I mean, but if you feel like if you have reasoning for Marowak being in B, I mean, I wouldn't argue. He's got a bone club, so that's pretty cool.
Well, maybe we'll leave them both here for the time being. Part of my like for the character might be sort of colored by his Alolan form.
I do like yeah, and that's like how he's related to the ghost. His Alolan form is has ghost powers, so it kind of comes full circle. So,
and it absolutely connects with the lore, and it really makes Marowak a super strong player because it retains its ground type moves, at least some of them, while adding fire and ghost. And it just has so much utility, especially in Pokemon Go. I run 2 different ones with different move sets on them in the Great League, and they're both at 1500 CP, and I love them. You don't see standard Marowak in Pokemon Go very much. It pops up occasionally in the Great League, but it's just really overshadowed by the Alolan form now.
Yeah, which is much cooler, even graphically, the design. But that didn't come along till several years after Kanto, so it's more of a distant fact.
Well, we have another couple of fighting types here. We have Hitmonlee and Hitmonchan. These are not in an evolutionary chain. They're distinct Pokemon, but of course, they add some things to the evolutionary chain in later generations. But how are you feeling about these 2 fighting types?
They're kind of weird. They're almost like people, which is kind of the reason I didn't like some of the other ones that are people-like, or the reason I won't like Mr. Mime or Jinx or something like that. But these 2 are a little bit different because they're actually just super cool. Hitmonlee, of course, is reference to what's his name? The kickboxer, something. What's the fighter? Hitmonchan's for Jackie Chan, and Hitmonlee is Bruce Lee. So Hitmonlee is actually in reference to Bruce Lee, and Hitmonchan is actually a reference to Jackie Chan. So I thought that was cool when they came out with them. Some Pokemon have cool things like that. So they're cool because of that. And I mean, they're just cooler looking Pokemon, especially for, a 10-year-old boy.
Sure.
So I like them, but they would generally suffer from the same things as, like, what is it? Is it a person? Is it a Pokemon? Is it an animal? It's just kind of in a weird phase. I mean, I like both of them. If I had my preference, I like Hitmonchan better. It can learn Thunder Punch, Fire Punch, Ice Punch. So has access to all these attacks that make him super effective. I actually used to use one in the Game Boy game because he basically could cover everything. I could have ice, electric, fire, plus a regular one. I could usually be super effective against most things. So I'd probably put Hitmonchan one higher than I'd put Hitmonlee. Maybe like a BC ranking, something along those lines. Those are kind of my thoughts.
Yeah, I was sort of thinking BC as well. My brother really loved Hitmonlee as a kid because, as you probably know, he was a soccer player. So he thought it was really neat that there was a fighting type that was focused on kicking, and he really liked that character. So I developed a little bit of an affinity for it as well, but in general, I agree with you. I don't think that it has a better design than Hitmonchan. Seeing the sort of boxer with the, I don't know, I thought it was dressed like a gladiator, right? With the armored coverings in the lower torso, and then it had the shoulder pads, and I don't know, it just looked like a gladiator with the boxing gloves. I thought the design was really neat for Hitmonchan, not to mention all of the moves that you listed for it already. It has so much coverage, and I think it's going to be helpful for a lot of folks in the upcoming Kanto Cup. So if anyone is planning to play the Kanto Cup in Pokemon Go and you need a strong fighting type, almost everybody is probably going to go straight for their Shadow Machamps, which is going to be rough because Shadow Machamp is going to be countered by psychic types like Hypno, which are going to be everywhere during the Kanto Cup, right? So your best bet on fighting types is to probably use one of the less popular ones that gives you access to a wider range of attacks. So Hitmonchan is going to give you a lot more coverage because it can learn Thunder Punch, Ice Punch, or Fire Punch. And then if anyone is lucky enough to have a Primeape in the Great League right now, Primeape can use fighting moves, but it can also learn Night Slash. So if you get stuck fighting something like a Hypno, you can still do super effective damage against psychic types with a Primeape.
Nice.
Just a little advice for upcoming tournament play. All right, and then we have what I feel was the Snorlax wannabe, Lickitung. It basically works the same way as Snorlax, but it's less powerful and slower, believe it or not, in Pokemon Go. And it's kind of weird. It's kind of weird, but
it is kind of weird. I mean, it's unique, it's original. So for that alone, it keeps it out of the bottom tier, I think.
Yeah,
it's kind of a funny Pokemon. It doesn't look like anything you've seen, I guess. I mean, it's kind of fun. It's not useful. It's not one that you use on any teams in the game or in Pokemon Go. Doesn't have real attachment to the anime. It's just kind of weird, but it's kind of cool. So I don't know.
right.
What are you thinking about it?
I was thinking maybe C or D because I almost forgot until you mentioned the anime there for a sec. I think Jessie keeps one for a little while in the anime. It's been a while since I rewatched it, so maybe one of the viewers can confirm for us, or I'll go rewatch some soon. But
Yeah,
maybe
I
there's
actually think I like the C category because I like Lickitung better than Slowpoke and Grimer and Shelder. So I'd probably put him up in the C category.
That's fair. If it has legacy moves in Pokemon Go, it has some utility because it can learn Body Slam, which will put it more or less on par with Snorlax. The trouble with using it in battle is just that Snorlax has access to most of the same moves and is generally tankier. So
yeah, a lot of hit points.
a lot of hit points. And speaking of Team Rocket Pokemon, we have Coughing and Wheezing coming up, which were famously the signature Pokemon for James in the Jesse James team up. How are you feeling about Coughing and Wheezing?
Teaches you why smoking is bad.
Yep.
Also big users of Koga for anyone that played the original game. Kind of, I think Wheezing is Koga's big guy.
Oh, right. Yeah. I forgot about that.
Yeah, he's probably the least known or liked gym leader of the original 8. So, but I mean, they're just a sludge monster. Neither one of them particularly reach out to me. I guess I probably like Coughing better than I like Wheezing just because of the James connection.
I do too.
And I like their names, Coughing, Wheezing. I mean, is there a choking, right? So
Yeah,
I wouldn't rank either of them particularly high, but I would probably put Coughing ahead of Wheezing.
I'm thinking Wheezing maybe for the bottom tier.
Kind of what I was thinking.
James does have one for a little while, but if I'm recalling correctly, the relationship kind of isn't as strong afterward because the character's already established, so it's just kind of there. And its design doesn't do a lot more than what they were already working on with coughing. But I do like that initial relationship that James had with coughing, and I like that the design has that nice message about smoking. And yeah, I think it's fairly popular and it's been kind of a fun Pokemon. So maybe the D category is a little bit better for it.
Puts it in the same category as Ekans.
Mm-hmm.
I think we gave it the same reasoning. So
yeah. Yep. And then two very powerful rock type Pokemon, Rydon and Rhyhorn. What are you thinking about these two?
So Rydon, right? That's Giovanni's heavy hitter, right? That's his strongest Pokemon. That's who he keeps in the 6 hole when you fight him in the gym.
Mm-hmm.
I actually like Rydon a lot. He's big, he's strong, he's powerful. He's Nidoking, but in my opinion, much cooler. Rhyhorn is, in my opinion, probably one of the better looking stage 1 things. He's better than, if you think of the 2-stage evolutions like Zubat and Golbat, or, Mankey Primate, I'd say Rhyhorn has a better design than Zubat and Mankey. He just looks more intimidating. So I'd say probably Rhyhorn's a C, but then I'd probably move Rydon either up to A or B, honestly. He's Giovanni's main guy. He's strong. He's powerful. He's dominant. So
I could see it potentially being an A.
Those are kind of my category. The main bad guy in the whole show, and this is his go-to Pokemon. Those are hard to argue. So
I agree. Yeah, Rhyhorn is definitely a better looking stage 1 Pokemon that has a pretty intricate design there. There's so few that are just true rock types in the first gen, and so these get a lot of credit for that as well. I think, if I'm remembering correctly, Rhydon can also use earth type moves, which can be a pretty useful combination. Puts it right up there with Golem. So I think with the lore and the design and the overall strength of the character, I think Rhydon goes in the A category.
Yeah, I have my Rhydon card from the first gen, and the art on the Rhydon card is just super cool. Like, he's more black than like gray for rock type. So the black alone, I think, just makes him look really cool.
And intimidating with that picture, because it's charging right toward the observer. So yeah, that's very cool. Then we have Chansey, and I feel like I have a lot of mixed ideas and feelings about Chansey, because on the one hand, they're very helpful. They're always with Nurse Joy. They do have some fighting utility with access to normal type moves like Snorlax and sometimes some fairy moves. So it has a bit of combat power as well. It's a beloved character because it's so cutesy, but at the same time, if I'm going to use a normal type in combat, I'm probably going to use Snorlax. If I'm going to use a fairy type in combat, I'm probably going to use Clefable. Its design is cute because it's minimalist, but the minimalism also means that it doesn't have some of the nice details that come with many of the upper tier Pokemon that we've ranked. So I don't know where that necessarily lands us. I'm curious about what you think.
Chansey is an interesting one. Of course, you've got the anime connection with Nurse Joy. It's one of the Pokemon that get to live outside of the Pokeball, kind of like Meowth and Pikachu, right? In the anime, it's always walking around. So that's cool. So in the original game, it actually did have good utility, right? It had an attack called Recover, right? So it could heal itself in battle, almost the same as Snorlax when he would use Rest, which would put him to sleep. The downfall with Rest is you actually have to put yourself to sleep, so you could be asleep for several turns.
Yeah.
Where Chansey, you could just recover and not be asleep. So it was like a even better attack. But if you needed to tank, for example, like what I would do, or a lot of people would do, you throw your Chansey out there, and then you would use items from your bag to heal your other Pokemon. Because when you use an item, you basically forfeit your turn, and you would let Chansey get hit by the opponent while you're healing your other Pokemon. And then right before Chansey died, you could use Recover, bring your health back up, and continue. So it was kind of a good stopgap. It kind of extended the game and gave you, it helped you out. So a lot of times, a lot of people, including myself, would use Chansey when they were going to the Elite Four, because you have to fight 4 people in a row without going to, or 5 people, because you have to fight Gary, without being able to go to a gym, or a Pokestop. So a lot of people put Chansey on their team to be able to tank during fights and things like that. So it's got a ton of hit points. In the original card game, it has the most hit points, tied for the most hit points as anybody with Charizard.
Yeah.
So they already had the most health. So for those reasons alone, it's very useful, or at least it was in the original game. I would probably put her no less, or her, I guess there could be boy Chanseys. I would probably, you would just think it's a girl, but I would probably put him no less than B, potentially even A.
Interesting. See, my first thought was C, but after hearing the arguments and being reminded of the general utility in the red and blue games, I think B could definitely be appropriate there.
I'm happy with B.
That's a good one. And yeah, it's funny, we have kind of randomly been referring to some of these as he or she or whatever, and for any of these Pokemon, they could hypothetically be, male or female, and it just, it'll tell you when you catch it what it is. But they do seem to design some of these in ways that are sort of stereotypically gendered. So I guess we've just been leaning into whatever framing they've given us.
Except for Nidoking and Nidoqueen, right? They can only be boys or girls.
Oh, so. Right. Yeah. Yeah.
And their lines. So.
Right. Well, we have another grass type coming up next, and this is sort of an unusual standalone. We're going to have several standalone Pokemon coming up in the rest of this lineup. So the next one is Tangela. And I always thought that one was just kind of goofy and weird. It was kind of Cousin It, but with vines instead of hair. So I never developed any serious attachment to this, but maybe you have some reasons why it's better than I think it is.
It looks like a bowl of spaghetti. There's not a whole lot there. It's unique looking. And I think Erica has one, so some people might be fairly attached to it.
Oh, that's right. Yeah.
I don't like grass Pokemon in general, as we've seen from our rankings. I think they're the weakest of the original ranking of the 6 types originally. So I wouldn't put an E just because it looks so much different than something else. I'd probably put it closer to D, but I have no real attachments, and nobody uses it for anything. It's just kind of there. Yeah,
I buy that. I think D is a good place for it. And that brings us to Kangaskhan, which has the interesting kangaroo design going on, and it always has the Joey in its pocket, which makes for a fun kind of added element to the player. If I'm remembering correctly, it's actually pretty strong in a number of contexts because it has access to rock and fighting moves.
Kangaskhan is another one of Giovanni's guys. He runs a Kangaskhan. It's kind of cool, but it's if you're going to use, it's nowhere. It's outclassed by Rydon, things like that. So it's not going to be at the top. But I like Kangaskhan enough. It's a cool Pokemon. It's probably I'd say around a C tier for me, somewhere around that. It's kind of cool that it's always got the Joey. I don't know, does that make it always female? Still talking on the male and female stuff. I'm not exactly sure. But it's actually a relatively large Pokemon. On the card here, it's 7'3" tall. So
oh my.
guess it's taking from the kangaroo aspect that it's kind of a tall Pokemon there. It's like an armored kangaroo. So it's cool. It's better than the ones in D and stuff like that. So that's probably where I would put it.
Yeah, good. It's funny because they crossed some unusual elements for this one. Kangaroos are generally thought of as being kind of tall and slim, right? If we're going with the stereotypical kangaroo image. But then due to its rock typing, presumably they tried to make it a little bulkier. So it's really difficult to tell the size of the Pokemon just by looking at some of the icons.
So I think the rock typing actually came much later in the Pokemon. Originally, Kangaskhan is actually normal typed. It's white.
Oh.
So it's actually not rock. So that's interesting. But I think now it is, like in Pokemon Go, it's a rock type, but originally it wasn't. So some interesting tidbits there.
Yes, even though it looks like it's made from rocks.
Yep.
I'm just going to look in my Pokedex real quick because I don't remember. I might have just been looking at its design and not actually knowledgeable of its typing.
Yeah, I've only got one Kangaskhan since it's a regional exclusive. It is actually a normal. It is not a rock typing. I'm looking at mine right now.
Oh, wow.
So it's normal typing, but it can learn earth and fighting moves because that's what mine has. So
how about that?
There you go. We even learned something today.
Yes, I did. I don't have one, so I'm glad you had your Pokedex handy because I looked at mine, and because I haven't caught one, it won't tell me the type. So hopefully on Kanto Tour, these regional exclusives will be available. In the advertisements, Niantic has said all of the original Kanto players will be available, but then if you look at the things that will be prominent in either the red or the green version of the Kanto Tour, none of them list those region exclusives. So fingers crossed.
You might be able to get them, but they might be hard to get. Yeah, I got mine. Luckily, I hatched mine. There was a week or two where you could hatch regional exclusives, maybe a year or so ago, and so I just did a lot of walking and stuff, and I actually hatched the only one I have. So
yeah, well, that was lucky.
Yeah. And it was basically like the last day. It was probably like the last egg I was going to get in, and I got it and was pretty excited. So
yeah, that's great. I think that is the last Kanto Pokemon that I need for my decks in Pokemon Go. Of course, Farfetch'd and Mr. Mime were filled out by their Galarian versions, which gave me the Kanto entry in the Pokedex. So it would be great to catch their Kanto forms if those become available, but we'll just see how it goes.
When does Kanto Week start?
I know that Kanto Tour starts on Saturday, so I'm not sure if Kanto Week begins on Saturday. Okay. Yeah.
Okay, cool.
Yeah, so I will be playing on the red ticket, which means if there is anyone in our little Facebook community who's playing with the green ticket, you should definitely reach out to me so that we can trade some Pokemon. And one of those Pokemon that will be available is Horsey, which was famously one of Misty's Pokemon, and also I think pretty well loved because it sold a lot of toys.
Horsey's cool. It's cute. It is one of Misty's Pokemon. I don't have a big affection for Horsey, but I do like Seadra quite a bit. In Gen 1, there's not a lot of dragon Pokemon.
Yes.
There's actually only 3 dragon that are literal dragons. But Seadra is kind of one of those resident dragons. If you're going to build a dragon team, you could put Seadra on it along with, Charizard, Gyarados, Aerodactyl, something like that. That's something that's kind of cool because it's one of those that can learn dragon attacks, right? Yes. So that alone, I think, is kind of cool. In the original card game, the original cards, the Seadra card actually is considered a dragon Pokemon. It says dragon. It's the 3 Dragonair, Dragonite, and Seadra are the only ones that say dragon Pokemon. So there's that. So that alone makes me like Seadra more than most.
Yes. So I was thinking of actually putting Horsey just by sheer popularity and I think design. I think it's better designed because you can tell some personality with its eyes and the way that it moves its mouth and everything. It has a little more
Yep.
personality than some of these in D. So I was thinking
Yep.
of putting Horsey perhaps in C, and then I'm also a pretty big fan of Seadra. So maybe even an A.
Yeah, I was gonna say A. I really like Seadra. It's, you know, like I said, it's that sub dragon class that is that I like. So
Oh yeah,
I like it on par with Tentacool and Cloyster.
nice. Yeah, I really need one for the Ultra League in Pokemon Go. So I have a, or maybe I want Kingdra for Ultra League and Seadra for Great League, but I have caught mini Horsey and not utilized them very well in my gameplay so far. So now I'm figuring out a bit more about what their evolutions can do. And hopefully I will grab a lot more of them during Kanto Tour. And I'm sure folks on this channel will see follow up on that. We have several more water types all clustered together in a row here. The first one is Goldeen, another one of Misty's Pokemon. That's just kind of an angry goldfish with a horn. So I don't know how you're feeling about that one.
Honestly, I don't like either of these next two, Goldeen and Seeking. They're just fish, right? They've got a horn. There's nothing cool about them, and they're outclassed by other water types, right? They're outclassed by the Blastoids family, the Poliwrath family, Gyarados, Lapras, you know, Vaporeon. You know, I'd
Yep.
even say even Starmie, right? So they're probably, you know, or Kingdra or Seadra, and I mean they're probably bottom of the barrel water types for me.
Yeah.
Their only real popularity connection is to Misty, but almost every water type besides like Gyarados and Lapras is tied to Misty. So
Mm-hmm.
so for that alone, they're probably pretty low for me. E or D for sure.
Yeah, I was thinking maybe Goldeen goes into D because of the popularity through the lore, and then Seeking would probably be in the E category.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking. Goldeen, I would put higher just because that's actually who Misty uses. She doesn't actually use a Sea King in the
Mm,
show. She uses the Goldeen. So
yeah. And it's funny, it seems like some of these cups that run in Pokemon Go Battle League are to help Pokemon that aren't strong in the normal meta to be able to have some time to shine. And one of the Pokemon that they seem to be trying to highlight during the Love Cup these past couple of weeks was Seeking. But the only way that Seeking would be valuable, even in the Love Cup, was if you had multiple legacy moves equipped simultaneously. So
and no one's going to use those elite TMs. So for that,
who wants to? It just seems like
no.
such a huge waste. Because after the Love Cup is over, even with the elite moves, it's not going to be that good.
Yeah.
So it's a silly thing to do. We have another couple of Pokemon that Misty was known for using. We've got Staryu and Stormy. And these aren't just like my favorite water Pokemon, but they are, I think, kind of neat designs. I thought they were a fun idea. They show up in the anime a lot. So I do feel a little better about these than some of the other water types we've been talking about.
I do like both of these upcoming ones better than the two we just did. Starmie, you know, is Misty's, you know, top Pokemon. So and I like the purple. I think the color is cool. I like both of these better than I like Goldeen and Seeking. I would put them both higher than them. I like Starmie better because again, for the same reasons I like Rydon. Starmie is Misty's big gun.
Yeah.
So, I mean, I think I like both of those. I think I like those rankings, B and C, for those. Staryu's connection to Misty, and I mean, I think those are good.
Excellent. Yeah, those gems in the middle I always thought were really neat as a kid, and the fact that they flashed and glowed during different types of attacks I thought was pretty cool. Starmie, like spinning around like a boomerang everywhere, was super cool to watch in the anime. So I really liked Starmie as well. Well, looks like we are having some connection issues again, so I will work on that. I promise one day I will have more stable internet.
Some technical difficulty?
Yeah, looks like it. Yeah, I promise one day I'm going to be on my own internet and not just sharing with others, and things will run more smoothly as we do some potential future podcasts.
Yeah. First one's always the roughest.
I guess so. Yes, this is sort of an experimental stage that we're in. So we are open to feedback. If y'all have ideas for us, you can always let us know in the comments. But right now, we are just kind of hanging out and talking about things that we like and encountering internet problems like any old Joe. And we're going to work through it.
When you're in the middle of a winter storm warning, then might happen. So
yes, that's right. Yeah, for anyone who watches these later, yeah, we've got some serious winter storm happening here in Oklahoma, where we're based. And that has made internet issues even worse. So what a fun time.
we've had time to make the videos though. So
that's right. We'll take
sitting
the good
inside
with the
because it's 5 degrees outside and a foot of snow. So we're just inside making videos.
Yep. I stepped outside for a couple of minutes earlier this week just to take some photos of ice Pokemon on Pokemon Go in the snow.
Mm.
And I enjoyed the photos, but also I did not enjoy how long it took to get feeling back in my fingers after stepping outside.
Nice.
So, yeah, so we agreed on those rankings for Staryu and Stormy. Starmie is very cool because of the lights in the gym and the fact that it spins around for its attacks. Very fun Pokemon. And that brings us to Mr. Mime, one of the unusual standalones.
Mr. Mime, this would be one of the other ones I would recommend for banishment. It's a weird Pokemon. It's basically a person. It's just kind of weird. The whole weird relationship with him and Jinx. It's kind of weird. If we're still going to talk about gender stuff, can Mr. Mime be a girl? His name's Mr. Mime. So that's kind of weird. I mean, since you've removed the banishment tier, I would obviously decide to put Mr. Mime in E, but he would be one of the ones I'd recommend for banishment.
I agree. This is a low tier Pokemon. I will set it right there in that E category. And we can deal with some of these other standalones. We have quite a few of the standalone players stacked up in a row. The next one is Scyther. And I'm going to be upfront here and say, even though Bug has kind of low utility, Scyther has one of the coolest designs of any of these first gen Pokemon, in my opinion.
I mean, I was going to rank Scyther pretty high myself. Bug doesn't have that much utility, but he's up there with Beedrill as far as strongest bugs go. I mean, and his design alone, I think, puts him at an A. He's got swords for arms. He's a cool color. He's like a giant locust. I'm not exactly sure what he's supposed to be, but he's one of the coolest looking Pokemon. That's for sure. I'm a fan.
Yeah. The arms always reminded me of a praying mantis. I do love those swords for arms. I was thinking about putting it in B just because it maybe doesn't have the same combat value as some of the others that we have in A, but I'm also not, super opposed to putting it in A.
Hey, it's not all about strength. We've got Squirtle up there in A.
That's true. Fair enough. I feel convinced.
I think everybody likes Scyther, so.
Oh yeah, fair enough. Yeah. The design, I think it gets pretty much everybody. And
Yeah,
it does
hard
have
to beat.
type attacks to help it out. So
It's the highest grass Pokemon we've ranked so far. So.
Oh yeah.
Remember, I don't like grass a whole lot, but in the original game, it was still a grass Pokemon. So, because there was only 6 types. So.
Right. And I think we're both going to agree on the Jinx.
Yeah, we don't have to spend a lot of time on Jinx. It's as weird as Mr. Mime. Again, can Jinx be a boy? It's I don't know. It's a weird Pokemon. It's got hair. I don't know. It's wearing a dress. It's like a person. I don't know. It's weird. So I would banish them, but we took away the banishment category for now. It can sit down there at the bottom. That's for sure.
It is a very awkward Pokemon. It seems to lean pretty hard into gendered stereotypes, and it doesn't have all that much combat utility. I can't think of anyone who I knew as a kid that was just a big fan of Jinx. They were all sort of like scared of Jinx.
Yeah.
So
her attacks are like kissing attacks, and it's just it's a weird thing. It's like I think her attacks are like smooch or something.
Right.
So I don't know. Weird Pokemon. We might as well just move on.
Right. Okay, so we have Electabuzz next, and I actually like Electabuzz pretty well. I think taking the tiger concept and turning the stripes into lightning bolts was pretty clever. They've also got the kind of bolts on the head in place of ears there. It's got the fangs to make it look pretty ferocious. It's definitely one of the stronger electric type Pokemon. I'm a fan.
Yeah, I'm actually a fan of the next several Pokemon coming up. There's not a whole lot of strong electric type Pokemon because you're stuck with Voltorb, or Voltorb, Electrode I don't like, and Magnemite, Magneton I don't really like. But Electabuzz I think outclasses all of those. I think it's at least a B. It's strong. I remember it from the anime when they go to the power plant and Pokemon Snap in the power plant. Yeah, I think it's cool design. It's one of the more, I like it on par with like Raichu and other things in that category.
Cool. Okay, yeah. I think B is a really good place for it. Definitely above average. Maybe not quite as cool as, say, a Haunter or a Hypno, but definitely above average.
Yep.
And Magmar is another one that I like pretty well, and I think you were just indicating that's pretty great. That big fight with Charizard in the volcano in the anime was just so good.
I like Magmar almost as much like Electabuzz. The only thing about Magmar is where Electabuzz was one of the stronger in fire types, Magmar is probably one of the weaker fire types because he's outclassed by Charizard, Arcanine, probably right on par with Ninetales. I'd probably still put him in B, but he's more of the low end of B. I mean, he's still cooler than, Kakuna and all the other things in C, and Raticate and things like that. But he's probably a little bit lower than Electabuzz, but not like a whole tier lower, probably what I would say.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense to me. We do have a lot of fire types in the S and A tier, so this still puts it a little bit lower than some of the other fire types that we would compare it to. For me,
it's in there with Ninetales and Rapidash, so I think that's probably about where it is, at least power-wise. The design, I think, is better for Ninetales. But I think that's a good spot for it.
Yeah, Magmar had some unfortunate nicknames because of the design of its head. So I definitely think that Ninetales was the more majestic, well-crafted player.
Yes. Yeah, yeah.
And then we have Pincer, and I know that you're a fan, so go ahead and talk to us about what you like about Pincer.
Sure. Pincer's, right on par with Scyther, I would say. One thing I really like about Pincer, it's one of those bug Pokemon that actually is worth something.
Mhm.
Um, and in the same argument from yesterday's video, for Kingler, it's the other Pokemon that can learn Guillotine, which is
Oh,
one of
right.
those one-hit KO attacks, right? It has low accuracy. It only hits maybe a third of the time, but if it hits, it's a guaranteed one-hit KO. So you could put those on your team and be able to take out something that is a lot stronger than you. Say you're trying to fight against a Mewtwo or something like that. You're going to have no shot straight up, but if you hit Guillotine, you win. So
Yeah.
it's kind of a gamble. So I like Pincer. I would say he's less than Scyther, so I'm okay with the B category. But those are kind of my thoughts. He's got good utility. He looks cool. I'd say it's a good design.
Excellent. Yeah, I'm with you on all of it. I think the design is really intimidating and neat. They came up with a cool way to make a bug seem like a scary battler. It does have battle utility. It's definitely upper tier bug type attacks, but it can also learn the fighting moves. And then, of course, in the original Game Boy games, it had even more utility with that guillotine move. So certainly an above average player. And then we have Tauros, another standalone. And it's a normal type, but it's probably outclassed by every other normal type in Pokemon Go, at least.
Except maybe
And
Evie.
it's kind of just a buffalo, right? Or a bison or whatever it's
Yeah,
based
out of
on.
all the standalone ones, it's more bottom tier as I mean, compared to what we just went through, Pincer, Scyther, Magmar, Electabuzz. It's the weakest, has no real value. It's just kind of a filler Pokemon. Nobody seeks them out to collect them. The only thing I even remember about it in the game is it's something you catch in the Safari Zone, just
Right.
like the Duo and the Trio birds. It's the only place you can catch them wild, and they're just kind of there.
Yeah. You just have it to collect it, not because it brings a lot of value to the game. Yeah.
And it kind of
Well,
stinks in Pokemon Go that that's the North America regional exclusive. To get something lame and boring. So I run across wild Tauros all the time. So
right. It seems like most of the regional exclusives are things that don't bring a lot of utility to the game. They're more collector's items. So Mr. Mime over for Europe, right? Mr. Mime isn't just a super great
yeah, I guess
combat
that's fair.
Pokemon. Same thing with Farfetch'd, right? You've got to evolve it into Surfetch'd for it to be valuable beyond just having it in the decks. So
Yep.
speaking of useless Pokemon, we have Magikarp coming up next.
Uh, the thing about Magikarp, right, is it it's like a jester. It has a role to play, and honestly, I would rank Magikarp fairly high. And I'll tell you why. It's by design to be pathetic because of Gyarados, right? I mean,
Right.
I wouldn't put it in like S or A, but they were trying to make this Pokemon as pathetic as possible, and I think they did. Right in the original game, it can't attack, right? So the only thing it could do was splash, which did no damage. So the only way to get to a Gyarados was you had to play Magikarp early, like lead out, and then immediately switch to a better Pokemon, and then have that Pokemon do damage, and then kill who it's fighting, and then they would split the experience. Right?
Right.
That was the only way to level up Magikarp, and you had to do that for 30, 40 levels to then get the reward of Gyarados. Um,
Right.
so it took a lot of work, and it's comic, it's pathetic, and I think that's the point. So I mean, that alone, I
Yeah, I buy that argument for sure. Looks like we froze up again here.
You back, Kyle? I think you cut out there for a second. Technical difficulty.
Always. Okay, so we'll start the screen share again. Yeah, thanks for sharing the background about Magikarp. I agree with you on all of it. I think it's purposely supposed to be kind of pathetic and funny. And I like how streamlined the design is through the evolutionary chain. You can tell that Gyarados, especially when you look at its face, that Gyarados looks like Magikarp. So that is at least something in its favor, that it has some consistency and coherence, that it accomplishes exactly what the designers wanted it to accomplish. And then we have the extremely popular, very well beloved Gyarados. And I already feel like this is an S rank Pokemon.
Yeah, I was going to ask if you have any argument against it being in the S tier. Gyarados is one of the coolest Pokemon there is. You know, even the journey from Magikarp to Gyarados is exciting. It was the first shiny available in the games with Red Gyarados. It wasn't even called a shiny when Red Gyarados came out. Right. It was just some mystical Pokemon. They decided to make it into shiny. Now shinies are a thing. But Gyarados, it's one of those pseudo sub dragons. If you have a dragon team, Gyarados is on there. He's your water component. He looks cool. He's like a flying lizard dragon snake. I mean, there's nothing to nitpick. It's a cool Pokemon. It's what it is.
It is. Yeah, I don't have any criticism. Loved it as a kid. Thought it was amazing in the anime. Thought the card looked great. Design is just amazing. Builds on, popular folklore.
Here we go. The original base set Gyarados.
Oh boy. There it is.
Yeah, one of the cooler cards. It can learn, and it knows Dragon Rage on that card. So.
Right. Yeah, and that's a thing that makes it really valuable in Pokemon Go as well, that it can learn dragon moves without being a dragon type. So that makes it pretty useful in especially the Master League of Pokemon Go, because you hit a lot of dragons in Master League, but dragons are weak to each other. So Gyarados, not being a dragon, just takes neutral damage instead of super effective damage, but it's dealing super effective damage when you throw it against other dragons. Plus, it can learn water moves, it can learn flying moves, it can learn dark moves, right? So it gives you offense against Mewtwo and Giratina and Gengar. I just think Gyarados is, in Pokemon Go, one of the best Pokemon that's in the game.
It's true. I'm a fan, and that red Gyarados just looks pretty cool too. So
looks so good, as if the original wasn't terrifying enough, right?
Yeah.
And then we have Lapras, and Lapras is another standalone. I'm kind of middle of the road on its design. I think that there are some fun aspects of it, but it is, sort of simplistic. But at least in Pokemon Go, it has high utility in terms of its combat abilities, having the water-ice dual typing. And because, of course, ice is going to do super effective damage against its major threat, which is grass types. And then in red and blue and gold and silver, you could use Lapras to surf around, right? So it had utility there too.
I like Lapras. Like I said, in the original card game, it's one of like 3 Pokemon that can learn ice attacks. Along with Articuno and Dugong. But yeah, Lapras is, I'd probably put it there with those other standalones, probably in B. I think a lot of the standalones, they did a great job. They didn't have to worry about that middle evolution that always plagues them. As you can see, a lot of the 2-stage evolutions are ranked much lower, even in the E tier, like Poliwhirl and some of those things. But Lapras doesn't have to deal with any of that. It's a cool looking Pokemon. It just kind of does its thing. It just kind of floats around. So there's not a whole lot of people that dislike Lapras. He's just kind of the cool guy, right? He's just kind of cool.
Right. And I think Ash had one in the anime for a while too.
Yeah, I think even in the theme song and the startup intro stuff, I think he's riding a Lapras there for a little while, so gives you some of that.
It's pretty cool. And we have our little transformer Ditto next. I'm very meh on Ditto.
Well, the argument for Ditto is, he could be Charizard, Arcanine, Gyarados, AlaKAHamm, all the Pokemon we have in S tier. So he could be right up there. He can be any Pokemon. So if you don't like Ditto, then he transforms into Charizard. Now you like Ditto. So that alone, I mean, I wouldn't put him in S, but he, in my opinion, deserves to be pretty high because he can mimic any of your S tier Pokemon. The only thing, so in the original game, in their original cards, Ditto became exact replicas of the Pokemon, right? Like its main only attack is transform. You literally get to be the other person's card, so it would have the same stats.
Yeah.
Attack and defense. I think in Pokemon Go, the Ditto keeps its lower base stats and just gains kind of the typing and stuff like that. So if it became a Charizard, it would have lower base stats and would lose straight up against its counterpart. But in the original game and in the Game Boy game, it would basically take on the other Pokemon and be pretty dominant. So especially if you got your Ditto to like level 99, it would be able to beat almost anybody because you would be a level 99 Charizard against, say, a level 50 Charizard that you're fighting. So you couldn't lose, really. You'd be whatever they are, just a stronger version. So
yeah. Although I think it has lost some of that over time, right? It can't do that in later games.
OP. Yeah, it was probably too overpowered originally.
Yep.
But I mean, it's a good design. It's kind of a, I mean, I would probably put it a tier higher, but that would be me. So
yeah, I'm okay with it in B. My gut feeling was C or D because it's just kind of a blob, but it does have a lot of utility, right? So I think that probably boosts it a bit. So yeah, I'm fine with B. Perfect. And then we have Evie and its family of evolutions there. Those are pretty well liked Pokemon. I think Evie itself probably has to rank fairly high because on, sheer popularity alone, they have sold so many Evie related items. Now it has games named after it. Evie is very popular.
Yeah, I mean, Evie's, one of the mascots, right? It's up there with Pikachu and Charizard, right? It has no value fighting, but it is super popular just because, every game that comes out or every, region of Pokemon, there's always two more Eevee evolutions, right? So
yeah,
it's something they kept going. So yeah, that alone, Eevee's got to be high. I'm okay with A or B. Just I'll let you give it the final ranking there, but it's I would probably put it in B because it has no value fighting, but it's just so, I think B is a good spot since we have Pikachu in A. If we're going to rate it on mascot and popularity value, I think it would have to be lower than Pikachu. So
sure. Yeah, B is what my heart was telling me. But what I'm super interested in is, because it seems like everybody has different answers for this, how would you rank the first three evolutions from best to worst?
So is it best to worst in, utility and strength, or who I like from best to worst?
Just
like
who you personally like.
Jolteon is my favorite. I think he looks the coolest. Since there's no starter for electric, right? There's a Squirtle and a Charmander for Vaporeon and Flareon. There's no electric starter, so Jolteon was actually who I always turn my Eevee into. Because again, I don't like Voltorb, I don't like Magnemite. So Jolteon was usually electric type that I carried around with me. As far as usefulness, it's probably Vaporeon who is the most useful. It has the most hit points. It's the most useful in Pokemon Go. It's got the best defense. I mean, it is weak to Jolteon, so it would lose straight up. But overall, I think it's better. I think in both scenarios, who I like in usefulness, I'd say Flareon is last. He's outclassed. He has some of the same pitfalls as Magmar. He's outclassed by Charizard, by Arcanine, probably on par with Ninetales and Rapidash. So if I was, but he still has cool design, and don't get me wrong, he's cool. But he would be my lowest. I would probably rank Jolteon and Vaporeon a tier higher than I would rank Flareon.
Yeah. So my order of like is exactly how they're listed here: Vaporeon, then Jolteon, then Flareon. But of course, I have a personal bias toward water types because, of course, Team Mystic here, right? And you are Team Instinct, so that makes a lot of sense with your choice there. So I do think that Vaporeon, at least in Pokemon Go, has the highest amount of utility if we're talking about combat against the meta, but it does straight up lose to Jolteon if they go head to head. So, and Jolteon has a fair amount of combat utility as well. Flareon is the one that has so many others that outclass it in its typing. So
yeah, I think we're easily agreed on that Flareon is the weakest. So the thing about Jolteon, at least in the original game, is he's actually the fastest Pokemon in the game. Because one of their base stats is agility, and so what that means in the game was you got to go first every time. Right. So you always got to attack first, and sometimes you even got to go twice in a row if you used Quick Attack. So originally you could use like Thunder and Quick Attack, and you could go twice even before they went because you were so fast. So that was one good thing about Jolteon. Honestly, I would put probably Jolteon and Vaporeon in tier A, and I would probably put Flareon in tier B.
I can see that. It's going to take a minute to move all of these. Our grid is very full now. Yeah, I like Vaporeon and Jolteon quite a bit, and Flareon's still cool. I would maybe put Flareon even in tier C, but I'm okay with it being in tier B.
Up to you. If you want to leave it in C, I'm not going to fight you on it. I think he's less. I never use Flareon, and we already have Rapidash and Ninetales in B. So I think Flareon is probably maybe a tier below them.
Okay. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense to me. It's fine. It's a fun design and everything. It just doesn't have the utility of most of the other fire types. And its design, while fun, is maybe not on par with, say, a Ninetales for me. So
there.
Yeah.
I did like the episode of the anime where the whole Evie one with the three brothers. It's a good episode. So I think if you're going to watch any, one episode, that might be a good episode that most people like. So if you never watched the show, you could watch that one and be like, oh, this is actually a halfway decent show. So it's a good episode.
Absolutely. And I think it's a good primer for learning about the different types and how Pokemon combat kind of works and all of that too. So yeah, it's a great episode. We have Porygon, another unusual standalone here.
It's one of those weird ones for me. Again, it's kind of non-organic. It's I like him more than I like Voltorb and Magnemite and stuff. He's kind of a weird Pokemon. I don't really see the niche that he falls in. I don't really understand the point. I'm not sure what he is. He's kind of a weird guy. The only thing I really know about him is in the original game. You couldn't get him. You couldn't come across him as a wild Pokemon, right?
Right.
In the game, Team Rocket basically has a casino set up in one of the towns, and you go in, you put some coins in, you spin a slot machine, and you can sometimes win or lose. And the biggest prize from their gift shop is a Porygon. So you have to have a ton of points to get the Porygon. You had to play their little slot machine casino for like hours to be able to get up to enough to buy the Porygon. But if you wanted to fill out your Pokedex, that's how you had to do it because there was no way to catch it. So
right. So it has some value in terms of scarcity and rarity, but maybe not so much besides that, right?
Yeah.
In later games, you can evolve it, and maybe it gets a little better when you evolve it, but not a lot better. In Pokemon Go, it's still very glassy through all of its forms. So yeah, D works okay for you?
Yeah.
Perfect. Then we have a set of 5 ancient Pokemon, and I think the idea of ancient Pokemon is pretty cool. So I like these fairly well. Maybe not just as like top tier Pokemon, but I do like their designs quite a bit. We're going to start with Ammonite and Amistar. Tell me what you're thinking about these two.
So yeah, if we're gonna talk about them as a group real quick, I like all 5 of these upcoming Pokemon. I will say I like the Kabutops better than the Omnite Omnistar. You know, in the original game, you're given a mysterious fossil, right? Early in the game, and then later in the game, you turn it into either a Kabuto or an Omnistar, right? You're given one of these in the game, mysterious fossil. And I always turn mine into Kabuto just because Kabutops looks so cool, right? He's kind of like Scyther. You know, he's got the so if out of the grouping, obviously Kabutops is my favorite. Out of the grouping of 4, Kabutops is my favorite. I would rank the highest. Probably in the B tier. Or even A tier. He's basically Scyther just with a little bit different setup. And the original card is really cool too. I think the Kabutops card is cooler than the Scyther card, right? I mean, he's got claws for hands, right? So the other, the one stage evolutions, Kabuto and Omnite, they don't do a whole lot for me. I think they're just a means to get to the bigger ones. I don't think they're bottom tier by any means or anything like that. But I like kind of where you have them ranked right now. I have Omnite and Kabuto and C, and then B for Omnistar and A for Kabutops, because they're so cool because of the lore, right? These Pokemon are supposed to be thousands of years old, and then you're just now being able to get them, right? They're not, you couldn't catch them in the wild in Pokemon, you know. They're just supposed to be really old, right? So I think I don't know, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, I'm totally with you on the lore. I always thought that they had that kind of mysterious ancient background, and that was a really fun part of the storyline. I'm also with you on the design. I think the first level designs for Ammonite and Kabuto are both very, very cool as compared to some of the other first evolution designs. And Kabutops is the best to me because it's, it almost looks like a xenomorph, but with katanas, right? It's
Mind you, the Alien movies.
right. I thought it was so great as a kid, and I loved that card. I remember getting that card out of the booster pack, and I was overjoyed because I thought the design was so neat. So definitely with you on rating Kabutops at the top there. But I do also like Amistar. I think it's scary. Its eyes are pretty scary. It's got those horns coming off of the shell. It's water and rock, just like Kabutops. So they do have a fair amount of utility in at least Pokemon Go. They're not just top tier in either category, but they do give you a lot of coverage that you maybe otherwise would not have. So I definitely run Kabutops in Ultra League teams from time to time.
Nice.
And we're left with pretty much all iconic Pokemon from this point on. So we're probably looking at upper tiers here. The last of those ancient Pokemon.
I don't think nothing will probably get less than a B or a C here on out. So
yeah, for sure.
the only potential one maybe is Dratini or something. But so starting with Aerodactyl, I'm a huge fan. He's one of those pseudo dragons, right? He's your if you were to run a dragon team, Aerodactyl could find a place on there, especially you needed it for if you're using the original 151. He can learn dragon attacks. He has the basic look as a dragon. You know, I'm a big fan. He has the same lore as those other ancient Pokemon. I remember in the original game, I think you get something called Old Ember or Ancient Ember. You have to take it to a lab or a scientist, and they turn into Aerodactyl for you. So honestly, I think Aerodactyl for me is probably an A tier because it's a dragon, and it's your Earth dragon basically. Earth flying dragon. It can learn rock attacks. It's one of those, again, it's one of those sub dragons. I'd probably have it right on par with King or Seadra, which we have ranked in A. So.
Yeah. I had it in mind for maybe B because I guess my point of comparison is the legendary birds, which of course we will be moving up higher shortly. And I just didn't know where we were going to put those birds or how Aerodactyl might compare to those. I know in Pokemon Go, it doesn't have, the same kind of strength as the legendary birds, but it is a really cool design. It does have super cool lore. So I can see the argument for putting it in A tier. So we'll go ahead and drop it there for now.
I do really like the original card for Aerodactyl. So
very cool art.
Yes, this one's actually a pre-release card. I don't know what that means, but that's the Aerodactyl card I chose to keep and like, so that's why it goes in there.
Nice. Well, I'm just going to go ahead and say it. I think Snorlax is a slam dunk for the S tier because it's so beloved. It's extremely popular. It sells toys. It's a funny design. It's combat useful. It's hard to find things to dislike about Snorlax to me.
Yeah, I would say Snorlax is pretty close to a shoo-in for the S tier. I think arguments can be made for A tier, but I think S tier is where it needs to go. He in the game, right? He had a good story. He blocked your path to get to later parts in the game because he was sleeping on the bridge or on the road. You had to get a Pokey Flute to wake him up. He's huge. I think on the card it says he weighs over 1,000 pounds. 1,014 to be exact. So if you think about the size of some of these other Pokemon, like a Squirtle who weighs like 12 pounds, right? This thing is huge.
Right.
It's a big story. If you're going to make a plushie, how can you not make Snorlax plushie? I mean, he already looks like a plushie. So
that's right.
Snorlax, and he has good, like I said, he's good in combat too. He's a tank, right? I use him in my Ultra League, and I usually use him in my starter because he doesn't have a lot of weaknesses, except if you come up across a champ or another fighting type Pokemon. But he can usually tank just basically any special attack. It lets me keep my shields, and he stays alive. I think mine has like 250 health points at 2,450 CP, right? So
yeah,
he just stays alive forever. So I like Snorlax. So.
I do too. I have one that I use regularly in the Great League and the Ultra League, and I just found a big one for Master League that I'm hoping to power up and start using there. So I think it has utility in all three of those Pokemon Go leagues, which is very appealing to me. Okay, now I think this will be an interesting discussion. Do you think all the legendary birds belong in the same tier, or do you like some of them better than others?
I think two of them belong in a tier higher than one of them.
I agree, and now I am so curious about whether we have picked the same ones.
To me, I think it's fairly obvious. So I bet we're on the same page. So if you want me to say it or you can say it, it's up to you.
You can go ahead.
I think Moltres is a tier below Zapdos and Articuno.
Yep, I am definitely with you.
Zapdos is my personal favorite. I mean, I'm Team Instinct anyway. Zapdos was my favorite to get. I think I would say probably Zapdos and Articuno are in tier S and Moltres in tier A. Zapdos is, in my opinion, the coolest design. He's got the sharp edges. You find him in the power plant in the original game. You know, he's fun to get. He's hard to get. I don't know. He's got high attack stats. He's all around fun Pokemon. Articuno, the only true ice Pokemon in the original 151. Gives him
Yeah,
so much power. He's the most majestic of the three, at least looking. Um,
yes.
and then Moltres, you know, oh, poor Moltres. I mean, he looks cool. He's a firebird. But again, there are other strong fire Pokemon, right? There's Charizard and Arcanine.
Yeah,
Charizard hurts all the other fire Pokemon below him, right? But I mean, Moltres is still cool, but there's not a whole lot of reason to use a Moltres when you could use Charizard. So
absolutely.
this would be the ranking that I would choose. So, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, I'm completely with you on the rankings. Zapdos, there is no denying that the design of Zapdos is just outstanding. It has those ferocious dark eyes. The beak pointing right at you is almost like it's about to break the fourth wall. You're scared for it to get close, right? Yeah, it
There
has
it
those
is.
thunderbolts around it.
The
Love the
Zapdos
design for
card.
Zapdos.
Yep, it's hard to beat that base set Zapdos card. Actually, I think this is from the Jungle set, but still the original card.
Yeah, and of course, I love Articuno. I think that it just has this classic design. It almost looks like one of the ancient Pokemon, right? It's so majestic with what they did with its tail, having the kind of icy wind around it all the time is such a neat effect. Its attacks are so strong against the meta in Pokemon Go. You can use it in any of the three leagues, right? Same thing with Zapdos. And then poor Moltres, just again a very cool design based off of the Phoenix. You've got to give the designers credit for putting in the effort there. But in terms of combat power, I will definitely take a Charizard over a Moltres any day in any of the leagues.
I mean, it is cool the way they did the naming, you know, Uno, Dos, Trace. And I think it's fitting that Moltres is the trace, right? It stays at the end.
Uh-huh.
But
And then this has turned out to be our longest video yet, and I should have anticipated that because we have some of the best Pokemon to talk about. We have 5
yeah.
left to go. We can do this. uh, then we have the Dragon Trio coming up, and I know that those are so I like them a lot, but I know that they are particular favorites of yours. So I'm going to let you start us off here.
So they are the only resident pure true dragons in the 151, right?
Mm-hmm.
So it's hard not to like all of them, right? It's kind of interesting how they go from Dragonair to Dragonite. It seems like there almost needs to be a another evolution in between there.
Right.
Not only does he grow arms and legs, he grows wings, so and a whole body, I guess.
Right.
So that's kind of weird, but it's so that's interesting. Honestly, Dragonair doesn't really jump out and grab me all that much. It would probably be what I rank the lowest, but still I wouldn't put him lower than B. But then Dragonite, Dragonite's a really interesting character because he's not all that ferocious looking, right? I mean, if you're looking about who looks more intimidating as a dragon, it's Charizard, right?
Right.
Or Gyarados. And the thing with Dragonite, he's in the anime, he's like a messenger, right? He has a satchel around him and he flies around and hands people letters.
Right.
So that's kind of an interesting little tidbit there. But he can obviously be very powerful. So I think Dragonite's good for the S tier. His name alone is really cool. He's almost depicted as really lovable, right? So in the original Dragonite card, he's just kind of wish I didn't have so much glare. He's just kind of sitting there looking all cute, not ferocious in any means. But when Pokemon Go first came out, Dragonite was the prize that everybody wanted to catch. There's a reason why. He's Lance, right? Lance, the leader of the Elite Four, runs multiple Dragonites on his team. And he's hard to beat because dragons don't really have a weakness except other dragons. And there's not dragons for you to catch. So,
right.
I think, and then Dratini is, the original, the cute. There's not a big difference between Dratini and Dragonair. So I could either have them in the same tier or staggered how you have them now. So what are your thoughts?
Maybe this would be my gut impulse.
Yeah, I think I like that better.
Yeah. Dragonite, just the lore and the fact that it's been, that it's Lance uses them. And in contemporary games like Pokemon Go, it still has such high utility, right? Even after we've released all of these extra gen players, if you're in the Master League and you run across a Dragonite, you're in trouble unless you've planned a really specific counter on your team. Because even if it's dragon versus dragon, Dragonite attacks faster than most other dragon types, and its CP.
Got Dragon Breath.
Mm-hmm. Yep. And Dragon Claw, right? So doing super effective damage really fast before others can charge up. I mean, Dragonite is just a champ.
True. What are your thoughts on Dratini and Dragonair? Just real quick.
Oh yeah, I think they're cool designs. So putting them in the B tier definitely puts them way above all of these other early designs, right? I think they're very sleek without being sort of overwhelmingly ferocious. Dratini looks a little timid maybe to me, but it's also very strong. It can also learn Dragon Breath. It can learn water moves. It can learn normal moves. So, I think it's a sleek, fun design on both of them. I think you're right that maybe Dragonair should have had some indication of where arms and legs are starting to happen. I don't know.
And it changes colors. It goes from blue to orange. So a whole lot happens between stage 2 and 3.
Right. I think we needed a third there between Dragonair and Dragonite. But I still think Dragonair is a very elegant design. They added the jewels. They made it a little longer and more sleek looking. The eyes
more
are
mature.
a little more focused. So I still think it's a cool design.
Yep.
We're down to the last two. And in case you all haven't guessed yet, my favorite Pokemon is actually the next one coming up here, Mewtwo. And I certainly have an affinity for psychic types. I'm sure that is no secret to anyone who's been watching or listening here. That's part of what attracted me to Team Mystic, was because they are in part known for keeping the psychic types around. Water, Psychic, and Ice seem to be their kind of main go-to players. I loved Mewtwo's lore. I thought Pokemon the first movie was such a fun feature film for them. And the character is the traditional Western anti-hero. It's the well-intended outcast that's sort of turned into a villain because of their circumstances, and they have a redemptive storyline. On top of that, it's a very sleek design. It's minimalist in a lot of ways, but then they've added in details, especially around the head, to make it look very focused and give it a wide range of expression. And in Pokemon Go, it produces so much offense. I would take a Mewtwo over almost anything in the Master League. I think it is just one of the most versatile, fast, strong, outstanding Pokemon all around. I am a huge fan of Mewtwo, and let me just go ahead and formally recommend that we put it in the S tier.
You're not going to get a whole lot of argument to me. No, Mewtwo is so strong. It's got the highest base stats in the Pokemon Go. It's my strongest Pokemon. I think mine's at like 4,100 CP. So I use it for everything because it hits hard. You know, it's strong. So apart from Pokemon Go, right? I mean, Pokemon wouldn't be Pokemon without Mewtwo. You know, if you look at the backstory, right? He was created in a lab from Team Rocket, broke away from. He's kind of the leader of the Pokemon against the human race, if you will. You know, or he's kind of there. Like if you've seen Detective Pikachu, you know, he's kind of he's the leader of the Pokemon, even with all the 500 Pokemon that have came out afterwards, right? Mewtwo is still kind of their leader, right? So you know, he's the strongest, he's the smartest, you know, all this good stuff. I'm a big fan of Mewtwo as well. It's hard to argue against Mewtwo. He's basically the reward for winning the game. You can in the original game, you can unlock the location of where you can go try to catch Mewtwo. You basically can't catch him unless you use your Master Ball, and you only get one Master Ball unless you cheat, which I could tell everybody how to cheat if they would like. There's ways to glitch the original games. But yeah, so the original Mewtwo card, everybody loves the original Mewtwo card.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, I mean, Mewtwo is great. I love Mewtwo. So
Me too. And I think it gets points for popularity on top of all of the other things we've talked about. And it's fun in Pokemon Go. It's fairly evenly matched with Gengar because Mewtwo attacks a little bit faster and it's super effective against the poison typing in Gengar. But of course, Mewtwo, its biggest weakness is going to be ghost types. So the fact that those two are so close and ended up being our respective favorites, I think is pretty neat too.
And Mewtwo can learn Shadow Ball, which is a pretty dominant attack. So
yes, mine definitely knows Shadow Ball. It is recommended on some websites that folks run different secondary moves than Shadow Ball, but it's just hard for me to see there being a better secondary move against the present meta, because you just have to look out for Giratina Origin all over the place. And even though you would get a little more damage from, say, Focus Blast against something like maybe a Dialga, you're still going to do something like 60 or 70% of the Dialga's health by landing a Shadow Ball anyway. And Focus Blast doesn't have that much utility besides the couple of steel types out there, whereas Shadow Ball does neutral damage to almost everything and super effective
and
damage.
Hits hard.
Yep, against key players. So yeah, the fact that Mewtwo can learn Shadow Ball is great. Definitely recommend Psystrike plus Shadow Ball.
Yep.
But we have come to our last. Yes. Now we have Mew. And I've just moved Mew up here and randomly placed it for now because I figure it will be in one of these top 3 tiers. Mew, of course, is the original Pokemon. It's also kind of the peacekeeper, the one that brings Mewtwo back from the brink and encourages Mewtwo to try and collaborate with humanity instead of being their enemy. So we have a very, this is the Professor Xavier to the Magneto of Pokemon.
That's very true. Yeah.
So I also really like Mew. I could see Mew maybe being A tier, but I'm probably leaning toward S tier for Mew as well. It has that great lore. It's very popular because of its design. It's very strong. How are you feeling about Mew? Of course, right here at the end, we're going to run into more technical difficulties.
Nope, you're back. Yeah, I think you're starting to cut out again there.
Yep, but we made it back.
Yeah, I know. I thought we were going to cut out on our last Pokemon. So for me, I would put Mew in the S tier, like for the same reason without Mew. So you have to have both of them. It's two sides of a coin. So I've got actually two original Mew cards, the ancient Mew card, which everybody loves.
Oh yeah.
And then the original Mew card. And cool thing about Mew, it can learn any attack, right? Any attack. And I think Pokemon Go kind of followed that similar strategy, right? It has a move pool of like 30 moves, right? I don't even know them all.
Yeah.
And that's kind of the point. It's kind of Mew is kind of part of like every Pokemon, right? It can learn fire, water, ice, thunder, whatever. It doesn't really, in the show or in the lore of the anime, it doesn't really do a lot of fighting. Like you said, it's kind of the peacekeeper, but I mean, it is the legendary of legendary Pokemon, especially in the 151, right? It's so majestic, and I thought it was always kind of weird. And one thing I don't like about Pokemon Go is that, you can have multiple Mews or you can have multiple legendary birds, in the anime or in the lore, there's only one of each of these Pokemon. There's only one Mew. There's only one Zapdos. There's only one Articuno. So the fact that you could have multiple or even shiny versions of them, I don't really like, because that means that there's multiple versions, like a shiny Mew. There's not more than one Mew, or at least originally there wasn't.
Right.
So, but they got to make money. They got to sell merchandise. So they got to expand. But so I don't really like that there's a shiny Mew. I think that's kind of dumb. So that's why I think Mew should be in the S tier. It's kind of, you can't have Mewtwo without Mew. They're kind of one and the same. And in the original game, you can't even catch Mew without cheating, right? You have to there's a glitch in the game, like in Red and Blue version, where you have to do these very specific things. And if you do them in order, it kind of unlocks a piece of source code that allows a wild Mew to appear. So that's the only way you can catch a Mew. And I'm pretty sure it kind of messes up your game because it's not a Pokedex. There's not a Pokedex entry for it, etc. But so whenever you beat the game, you can usually catch a Mew just for a cherry on top. So.
Right. Well, I agree with all of your reasons for putting it in the S rank. I definitely was leaning that way myself. I think that's where it belongs, together there with Mewtwo. Just to give a plug for Pokemon Go for those who play the game at home, if you disagree with Tyler about the shiny Mew, you will have the opportunity to catch one during the Kanto tour this coming weekend. So definitely buy your tickets for that if you would like to have a shiny Mew. You can still have access to most of the Kanto Pokemon even without the ticket. So definitely plan to play that this coming weekend, regardless of whether you buy the ticket. But with the ticket, you do have a greater opportunity to catch some of those Pokemon that will be tougher to access. I imagine that's what you're going to have to do to get things like Kangaskhan and Mr. Mime, and that will give you the opportunity to catch shiny Mew for the first time ever in Pokemon Go. So that should be fun, albeit inconsistent with the folklore.
Yeah.
Well, I am very happy with our ranking system here. I'll just scroll through one more time for the audience to see where everything landed. I like our distribution. We seem to have most of the Pokemon in kind of a middle ground area here in the C, and C is where we caught most of them, and have a lot more in B, have a lot more in D, and then we have
it's almost the way it should be.
Yes, yeah. I'm very happy with that distribution.
Right. I mean, C is supposed to be average. It should have the most people in it, and I think we didn't mean to do that on purpose, but that's kind of what happened. So
that's how it worked out. Do you feel good about where we ended up with the rankings here?
Yeah. I said I probably would have banished 2 or 3 Pokemon, but no, I think I'm happy with our results.
Yeah. Well, this has been such a fun process. It's great to be able to kind of use this as a springboard to take a trip down memory lane, think back on the red and blue games, think back on the anime, and come up with some ideas for how we can be successful in Pokemon Go as well. So thanks again so much for joining me and talking through some of these rankings. And hopefully this will be the start of several fun kind of audio-visual podcasts for this channel. I hope that all of you will be back to see future episodes as well. Any closing thoughts, Tyler?
Kyle. No. Thanks for having me, Kyle. I will say my expertise drops off even when you get to the next region. I only played silver version once. And I never played it again. I mean, I remember bits and pieces. I at least know all those, most of those Pokemon. And then when you get past that, I can't even tell you what the names of half of them are. So
sure.
Kanto is what I like, what I care about, So you might have to find you a, different resident expert on some of those later regions. I don't have any cards of them, I barely know the Gen 2, right? I mean, I like some of those Pokemon like Tyranitar and stuff like that. But after that, it's hard. I can't tell you a whole lot. But as far as the Kanto region, I'm happy with our results. I think it was fun. I hope people enjoy the video. I know my wife's already been watching them.
Hey, great. We'll have at least one viewer.
Yep. So give us some likes and subscribe to Kyle's channel. He produces a lot of great content. So
thanks for that. I knew that, of course, you would have to be the person to help us out with Kanto Week because of your love of the Kanto Pokemon and your thorough background with it. So I'm glad we could get together and do this. Of course, my first Game Boy game growing up was Pokemon Gold, so I also really love the Gen 2, and I will probably have another episode sometime singing the praises of Totodile and Feraligatr, and that'll be lots of fun. Well, send me some gameplay footage of your spectacular Master League team, and I will do another video featuring your gameplay sometime soon.
Yeah, I just got my third attack from my Tyranitar this morning, so I needed to get up to 75 Tyranitar candies, and I finally hatched one. So
awesome.
Yeah. So hopefully I'll get around to that.
Yeah, sometime soon. Use that extra time you've got because of the snowstorm, right?
Yeah.
Well, this has been great. I'm going to go ahead and sign us off. So I, once again, am Professor Pokemon, AlaKAHamm, and this has been Tyler, gamer code ToCool101. And this has been a ranking of the original Kanto Pokemon. I'll be producing more content about gameplay in Pokemon Go, and I hope that all of you will join us on that journey as well.